Hi there. Tensions have flared up in the South China Sea following a clash between the Chinese Coast Guard and a Philippines resupply mission. So how is Beijing reacting to this? I'm Aaron Young. Let's find out.
Now from our headquarters at TICKER Park, this is TICKER Today.
All right, so China's top diplomat Wang Yi has urged the Philippines to work with Beijing to try resolve renewed tensions over a clash between the China Coast Guard and a Philippines resupply mission. Taking place in the South China Sea, the clash saw the Chinese vessel fire water cannons at the Philippine ship carrying military supplies. Now, Wang, who recently replaced Qin Gang as the foreign minister in an unusual circumstance, has tried to downplay the situation, but he has also suggested that black hands in the US were trying to undermine regional stability and security. To talk to us more about the situation, let's bring in TICKER's correspondent Adam Hancock, who is in Singapore. It is interesting, whenever China has a flare-up in tensions with another nation, it's always Beijing saying the other nation needs to learn to work with it.
Yes, you are absolutely spot on there, Aaron. It's a common theme of these kind of situations, particularly at the moment. And if you're looking at this from a purely outside point of view, you would say, well, what really do the Philippines have to apologize for? They technically, although China would dispute this, but technically where this World War II ship is grounded in the South China Sea, it's within their exclusive economic zone, as it's called. It's basically a ship that no longer works. It's just been beached on the shoal. And the Philippines are sort of using it as a little bit of like a military outpost. So there's a few soldiers on there, but every now and again they need supplies like water and food bringing to them. And this ship was just making its way towards this outpost, delivering it when it got attacked by a water cannon. So from the Filipino point of view, there's been a lot of back and forth about what exactly the Philippines promised in terms of removing the ship. China saying that they promised to get rid of it, the Philippines coming back and saying, no, we didn't. But from their point of view, it's been there for a while. These soldiers have been on board for a while, and they're just resupplying it and were basically attacked. And I think when you hear this story and you hear water cannon, it doesn't actually sound that threatening, really. You know, it kind of reminds you of a garden hose or something. But these things are very dangerous. And, you know, if it hits someone, if it hit a person, it could cause really severe injury. So it's actually more of a story than it probably first appears. But yeah, as for China, well, it's the Philippines' fault, and they need to come to the table to diffuse tensions.
You mentioned just how significant these injuries could be. Do we know if there were any injuries during this clash?
There were no reports at the moment of any particular injuries coming from this incident. So, and I think that probably will help with things not escalating too far out of control. And we're led to believe it was a Chinese Coast Guard vessel where the water cannon was coming from. And again, you have to question why Chinese Coast Guard vessels are, patrolling in this manner. There's also these interesting smaller little ships that for a long time, analysts in the region have believed that they belong to Beijing and they're effectively part of a military force patrolling the seas, but something China have always denied, and there's certainly not been a lot of evidence. But in the video footage, that some of these smaller boats are actually captured, and there is kind of a sense that this is the first time that they've been caught on video getting involved, engaging in conflicts in the South China Sea. So, and it's not the first time we've seen this already this year. We had earlier the laser incident from a Chinese Coast Guard ship. So it's particularly at the moment China and the Philippines. I mean, lots of different countries have different stakes in the South China Sea, but the flare-up seems to be coming between China and the Philippines, and that could well be because the Philippines are getting closer with the United States.
Which is a very good point. I was about to ask, why is this territory under dispute? Because it feels like this ongoing rift over the South China Sea has been happening for quite some time. Is this so much, do you think, about the territory that is under dispute, or essentially a sign from Beijing, do not get too close to Washington?
I think it's a little bit of both, in all honesty. China is very passionate about the South China Sea. They pretty much claim the entirety of it as their own territory, but plenty of countries, I think it's something like 7 or 8, claim these special economic zones. And why it's so important is it's very resource rich. It's also a crucial strategic route for shipping, for access to East Asia and Southeast Asia. So China having control of it, which they're trying to by building up military bases around it, getting more and more aggressive as their navy expands is something very important to Beijing. But as you mentioned, the Philippines, who originally under the original previous regime, they were a lot more aligned with Beijing. They've now switched under President Marcos Jr. to be more closely aligned with the United States. There's been a lot of visits from people like the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin. They signed a defense agreement earlier this year, basically the United States pledging to protect any Philippines vessels that come under attack. So I think what Beijing knows all too well about close links between countries in this part of the world and the United States. And it probably is a little bit of a reminder to say, you know, be careful, don't go too far with them. We're watching you and we're aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, interesting to see the statement from China's foreign minister. I'll just read part of it here. He says, China's repeatedly expressed its willingness to resolve differences with the Philippines through bilateral dialogues, hoping that the Philippine side would abide by the consensus reached in the past and cherish the mutual trust accumulated through the improvement of bilateral relations. You could swap the word Philippines with India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, the United States. This is a very similar path that they take with all countries, which is this idea of mutual dialogue, as in, let's keep talking, let's not react on the world stage.
Yeah, it's a common theme. It's a common statement. As you said, it's kind of a little bit rinse and repeat. And it's often a situation where there has been some kind of clash or flare-up, China effectively exerting a bit of their authority, and then they come out and say, well, let's try and calm things down and talk about it. But one thing to note actually about the former and now returned Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he's only made a couple of trips overseas since he took up the post. And one of them was just in the last few days. He actually came to Southeast Asia, visiting here in Singapore. He went to Malaysia and he also went to Cambodia as well. Now, China have good relations with all of those countries, and it's a fairly easy visit for him to make, both geographically and also in terms of relations. You wouldn't expect too many surprises. But I think as well, at the time that we're seeing renewed tensions between the Philippines and China, it's kind of China's way of making a statement to say, we still have very good relations in Southeast Asia. We still have a lot of support. And granted, a lot of the countries in this region who are part of the ASEAN alliance, they kind of stay out of these disputes a little bit.